All right, section 8.3 again. So we did, well, quick little review. I'm not going to go through a whole lot of this stuff, but I'll tell you what. I will do this, though. I will grab this. What kind of triangle, what kind of special triangle did we talk about yesterday? 45, 45, 90. Okay, so watch. There's a right triangle, so there's your 90. These two sides are equal to each other. It's isosceles. And so if these two sides are equal to each other, the two angles are equal. They both add up to 90. So if you split them in half, they're both 45. So that's 45, 45, 90 triangle. So here's what we did yesterday. We said if, let's say that length of that side right there was 4. What's the length of this side down here on the bottom? All right, it's going to be 4 as well. Here's the one part that we talked about yesterday that you probably didn't know before yesterday. Let's pay attention, please. So what's the hypotenuse? We should be able to find the hypotenuse if we know one of the legs of a 45, 45, 90 triangle. That's it. You just multiply it by the square root of 2. So it's the leg multiplied by the square root of 2. Let's write that down. So the hypotenuse, this is only on what kind of a triangle? 45, 45, 90 triangle. The hypotenuse is equal to the square root of 2 times one of the legs. All right, that's what you should memorize right there. It's very important. So if you know the leg, you multiply it by the square root of 2 to get the hypotenuse. Conversely, how's that for a word? What if you knew the hypotenuse? How would you find the leg?
The hypotenuse equals the square root of 10 divided by the square root of 2.
That's right. You divide it by the square root of 2. Look, if you know the leg, you multiply it by square root of 2 to get the hypotenuse. If you know the hypotenuse, then you go the other way. You divide by the square root of 2. How do you know that? Well, you look at your formula up here. Look, if I wanted to solve for the leg, which is x, right? So watch, let's fill some numbers in. What's the hypotenuse to this? It's 10 equals the square root of 2 times what? What's my leg? It's x. Now, what algebra do we do? We divide by the square root of 2 here, divide by the square root of 2 here. That cancels, that cancels. That's your answer right there. Okay? Now again, remember, just so that you know, in Algebra 2, I'm not going to let you keep your answer like this. You have to change it. But for right now, I'll just let you keep it like this. Is that fair? Yes. You could put it in a calculator if you wanted to. There's really no need to put that into a calculator. It would be fine if you leave it like that in the circle. Okay, if you, to actually, what, to simplify it? Do you really want to know that? All right, I'll show you. Look. And you're going to look at this and say, what? What are you talking about? I'm showing you. Look, let's just review real quick here. And we actually talked about this yesterday. I'm just picking a number out of the blue, square root of 5. What if I multiply the square root of 5 by itself? What do I get? I just get a 5. Really, if I take any number, let's say the square root of 17, then what's that going to be? It's 17. So look, what I'm going to do is there's somebody, somewhere, sometime, I don't know when or where or who, but they said you can't have a square root in the denominator. All right? They said it's not simplified. So technically, this is not simplified. All right? For you guys, for not just you guys, this class, but in general, for geometry, I'll just let you keep it like this. But when you get into Algebra 2, they get a lot more picky. All right? And so this is what they want you to do. How do you get rid of that square root in the denominator? Well, if I multiplied by the square root of 2, what's the square root of 2 times the square root of 2? It's 2. So that will get rid of it, right? But I just can't multiply the bottom by the square root of 2. I multiply the top by the square root of 2. Because what's anything divided by itself? So 1. It's not itself. It's 1, isn't it? So what's the square root of 2 divided by the square root of 2? It's 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. So really, all I'm doing is taking this and multiplying it by a 1. Do you change the value of a number if I multiply it by 1? What's 5 times 1? What's 17 times 1? What's 137 times 1? What's this times 1? It's this. I didn't change the value of it, did I? But I did this, though. I did change what it looks like. What's the square root of 2 times the square root of 2? It's 2. And then we multiply the top, which would be 10 square root of 2. We're almost done. I got to do one more thing. It's not hard. Look at it. What else can I do to simplify this? That's right.
10 by 2.
That's right. Okay, 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 10, what? 5 times. So really, that's the same as 5 square root of 2. That's technically how you're supposed to write the answer. Okay? Let me just show you real quick. If you don't believe me that they're equal to each other, let's put them both into a calculator and see. So let's do 10 divided by square root of 2. Well, it's supposed to be 10. 10 divided by the square root of 2. Alright, 10 divided by the square root of 2 is 7.07. I'll just write that down. Or 7.1. Okay? So that was this, correct? Let's try 5 square root of 2 and see if we get the same thing. We should get the same thing, shouldn't we? Alright, if what I said was right. So 5 square root of 2. And then, ready? Hold your fingers. Boom. It's exactly the same thing. Would you agree? So this is definitely the same thing as this. So they're equal to each other, but this is a simplified form. Why is this more simplified than this? Because it doesn't have a square root in the denominator. Exactly right. Okay? So there you go. Now you learned it, okay? But I'll still allow you to keep your answers like this for right now. You got it?
How did you get a fraction?
How did I get a fraction? I went 10 divided by the square root of 2. Right? I went. Okay, we just went through it. You're gonna have to look. You're gonna have to watch again because I'm not gonna repeat it. All right? You can repeat it on the video. Thank you. You can repeat it on the video, but I went through it. I even showed the steps and everything right there on what to do. Okay. Now that was review. Today we're not going to do a 45-45. Didn't I give you a sneak preview yesterday?
Yeah.
Yeah, I gave you a sneak preview, and that was 30-60-90. So your triangle looks a little different now, doesn't it? These two sides are now not equal to each other. Tell you what, let's stretch this out just a little bit more, just to make it a little bit more obvious. Okay, so here we go. This is 90. This right here is 30 degrees, and this up here is 60 degrees. All right? And what is this side going to be? What am I going to call this side? It's hypotenuse. How do you know it's the hypotenuse? Opposite the right angle. Very good. You guys have been paying attention. All right, so it's opposite the right angle. That's the hypotenuse. Now, yesterday we alluded to this. Do you remember? What's this side? As far as the legs, okay, I got 2 legs right here, right? All right, or the triangle has 2 legs. This triangle right here, by the way, talking of, because I said I have 2 legs, I was going to say I almost don't have one. Do you see this wrestler? There's this wrestler, he's got 1 leg. He's like the national champion in his weight class. He's got 1 leg. Yep.
There's a wrestler who has like.
This guy's the national champion. This guy's the very best in college in his weight class. He's got 1 leg. And he wrestles. He doesn't have a prosthesis or anything. I walked in the door. My son, were you watching it too? Or yeah, Benjamin was watching it too. I walked in the door right after he had got done, and I didn't get to see him. But they told me he's got 1 leg, and he like crushes everybody. He's like the national champion of the whole entire country, and he's got 1 leg. Isn't that crazy? Anyway, so that's speaking of 2 legs. So it's probably on YouTube if you look it up. Let's watch. So there's 2 legs of a triangle, right? This leg is opposite the 30, so compare this leg to this one right here. This one is what? It's shorter, right? We call this the short leg, all right? It's the short leg, all right? Because why? Why is it the short one? Just because it looks like it? No, because it's opposite the shortest side, the smallest side, or angle. I said side. It's opposite the smallest angle. We good with that? All right. What about this one right here? This is opposite the 60, so it's the long leg. It's not the longest side, is it? What's the absolute longest side of the triangle? The hypotenuse is always the longest side of a triangle because it's always opposite the biggest angle. But as far as the legs are concerned, this is the long leg. All right? So let's write this down. This is 30, 60, 90 triangle. All right? Now, there's a couple relationships. This is what we didn't talk about yesterday. All right? Here's a couple relationships. Now, look, I'm going to circle this because that's your key side. That's the key side to this whole triangle. Both of these relate to the short side. There's a relationship between the hypotenuse and the short leg, and there's also a relationship between the long side and the short leg. Okay? All right? Now, they are bigger, okay, because this is the shortest side of the whole thing. They are bigger, but how much bigger? There's a specific relationship. Look at the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse, it's not triple, it's actually twice as big. Now, I didn't probably draw this triangle exactly to scale, so I can't like measure this out and see if it's exactly twice, because I didn't make sure that that was 30 degrees. But just trust me on this. Trust the book. There are proofs on it. The proofs are a little bit harder than what we did on the 45, 45, 90. So I'm not going to go through the proofs. You're just going to have to believe me on this, okay? That the hypotenuse is exactly double, not 3 times, but exactly double the short side. Okay, it's twice as big. So let's write that down. The hypotenuse is equal to twice 2 times the what? The short leg. Okay. Put that in a box, circle it, put arrows pointing to it, put bells and whistles on it, whatever it takes, light it up, okay, so that you know what that says, okay? So the hypotenuse is twice as big as the short leg. Let's do a quick little example. If the hypotenuse was equal to 10, what's the short leg? That's all there is to it. That's easy. That's even easier than the square root of 2 thing, isn't it? All right? So if I know the hypotenuse, the short side is half of the hypotenuse, or the hypotenuse is twice the short leg. Let's do it this way. What if I told you the short leg? What if the short leg was 3? What's the hypotenuse? It's 6. It's as easy as that. Everybody see that? So the hypotenuse is exactly twice as big as the short leg. You can handle that, can't you? That's probably the easiest out of all of them. Then the next one's very close to the 45-45 kind of thing. It's pretty close to it. But it's the long leg. Now remember, they both relate to the short leg. So the hypotenuse is so many times the short leg, and the long side is so many times the short leg. All right? But the long side, it's not square root of 2, it's the square root of 3 times the short leg. So you're going to have to remember these numbers. You're going to have to keep them straight. There's 3 different ones, right? One for the 45-45 and 2 for the 30-60, 90. So you got to keep those straight right there. All right? Put arrows, brackets, put boxes, circle it, do whatever you need to, make it different colors, whatever you need to do. All right? So that's what we have right there. All right? Let's do a couple examples with this. All right. Let's just make up some numbers here. So this is 30, and this is 60. All right. I'll tell you what. Let's do it. Let's do the easiest possible version of this that we can. Then we'll do a little bit of a harder version of it. Okay. So let's make that 7. Is that all right? All right. So this is the which side? That's the short side. Why? Because it's opposite the 30 degree. Okay. Make sure, because they're not. All these triangles aren't always going to look this nice. Okay. It's not always going to be flat. They're not always going to be having the short side going up and down. You follow me? Okay. So you have to see the angles and see which one is opposite what. All right. So this is the short side. What's the easiest? Probably. I don't know.
To find the hypotenuse.
Okay. Yeah, let's do the hypotenuse. Actually, either one are just as easy. But yeah, how do you find the hypotenuse? It's double the short side. So that would be 14. How do you find the longer side?
7 times.
Like 8.5?
We squared no,
You said.
Square root of 3 times the short.
is the same.
Okay, which is? How do we write it? You said it. Kenny, say it.
7.
Right, 7
Like 12.5.
times the square root of 3. Who's talking decimals? We're not talking decimals. We're talking. Make it easier. I'm trying to make it easy for you. You're trying to make it more difficult.
You can leave it like that.
Write it like this. Yes, I've said it 100 times. Okay, you can leave it like that. It's perfectly fine to leave it like that. If me personally, if I had a test and I had to do this problem, I would leave it just like that. I would not put it into a calculator. Does that mean putting it into a calculator makes it wrong? No, but I wouldn't do it. Even though I said that, I'm doing it. All right, just to show you how to do it, okay, if you really wanted to. I personally wouldn't, but if you wanted to, you could. All right, so it's going to be 7, okay. Now, in this calculator, you don't have to hit times. All you got to do is put it right next to it, times the square root of 3. If you have one of the smaller scientific calculators, that TI-30 or something like that, you would hit times. You'd hit 7 times, then you wouldn't hit square root. You would hit 3 square root, and then hit equals. You hear what I said?
Yeah.
All right, you would go 7, and then times 3 square root, and then equals. if you had a little scientific calculator. All right. On this one, though, you do it like this. 7, then square root. You don't even have to hit times. Hit square root of 3, then you got to hit enter, and that's what it is. So it's around 12.12. Let's just see if that makes sense to us. 12.12. Does that make sense? Yeah, because 7 is the shorter side, right? 14 is the longest side, right? The hypotenuse, and this has to be in between. If you do a squared plus b squared, and it will equal c squared. Watch. Let's do that for fun since you just mentioned that.
Thanks, Rayvon.
So watch. 7 squared plus this right here, 7 square root of 3. We got to square that whole thing, though. We talked about that the other day, didn't we? All right, equals what? It should equal 14 squared. Let's see if it does. Well, what's 7 squared? 49. Let's do this. 7 squared is 49 times, what's the square root of 3 squared?
3.
It's 3, okay? Now, I don't know what that is. We'll put it into a calculator. And I don't know what 14 squared is. I'll put that into a calculator. So let's see. Let's do 14 squared first. 14 squared is 196. So 196. All right? Yeah, I don't, oops, sorry, wrong thing. This one. What's 49 times 3? I don't know what that is. 49 times 3 is 147. So I've got 49 plus 147. Does that equal 196?
Yeah.
Okay, let's... Why do I keep doing that? I don't know why.
It does.
Yeah, it probably does. 49 plus 147. Yeah, you should be able to do that in your head. Sure enough, so that's 196 equals 196. That's a nice way to check to see if you got it right. And it does work, doesn't it? Okay, so this does work. That's kind of like a little mini proof, I guess. If you, not really, but it kind of is, to see if it really works. So that's nice. It's nice that we did that.
So you just, the one that you had in parentheses, you just multiply it by whatever the square root is.
Yeah, I'm just checking is all I'm doing. He said, if you use Pythagorean theorem, will this work? And so I said, well, let's try it and see. And that's what I did. So it's this squared plus this squared. I got to put that whole thing in parentheses. So you multiply the 7, you square the 7, and you square the square root of 3. If you square the 7, it's 49, right? If you square the 3, or the square root of 3, it's 3. Multiply them together, it's 147. Added to this, it's 196, and so is that. So yes, it does work, doesn't it? Okay. All right, that was the easiest version, is when I give you the short side. If I give you the short side, it's very easy, okay, to find the other two sides. I'll tell you what, just for the fun of it, right? Let's stick another number in there. Let's not make it such an easy number. Let's make it like a square root. All right, let's see what happens. What if this was like the square root of 10? You want 37? We'll put 37.
What the heck, Eric?
Yeah, 10 sounds
I'm
better.
getting sick of you boys.
Okay, let's watch. Let's say this was square root of 10. What's this side going to be? The hypotenuse.
2 times.
It's going to be 2 times, right, because it's double. It's twice as big as this side. So it's 2 square root of 10. You leave it just like that. Okay? That's easy, isn't it? What's this going to be?
No.
No? Let's do the math. It's the square root of 10 times what? Square root of 3.
Can we do it like that?
No,
you put it
we
all
talked about
under
this
one
yesterday.
square root.
Right, you put it all under one square root,
So it's
exactly.
30.
And that's square root of 30. Not just 30, but the square root of 30.
Wait, how'd you get
That's how you would leave it. Because the long side is the square root of 3 times the short side. So it's the short side, square root of 10, times the square root of 3, and that gives you square root of 30. So those, I'm very proud of you, Kaylee. All right, so that's how you do those two things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Remember, it's not hard to multiply this, is it?
All
right.
Yeah, 10.
Not yet. We got a couple more examples to do. All right. What? You want to know how to do these, don't you?
We know
This is
how.
helpful. Yeah, we'll see. All right. What if we did this? What if I said that this was
Square root of 100.
26? Let's say this was 26 and this was 30 degrees. First of all, if this is 30 degrees, what does this have to be?
60.
It's got to be 60.
Short side is 13.
Okay. Yeah, so the short side is, that's the easiest one. That's 13, isn't it? Because it's after this. And now you know the short side, right? So if you know the hypotenuse, listen,
You should find both of them.
settle down, please listen, because you're going to miss some stuff. If you know the hypotenuse, you can't go directly to the long side, can you? You've got to go through the short side. It's all about the short side, okay? Find the short side first, then you can find the other one. All right? So if I know this, I find the short side first, and then I take the short side and I do what to it? Multiply it by the square root of 3. Right. On 30, 60, 90, it's the square root of 3. What is it on 45, 45? Square root of 2. Okay, we getting this?
Yes.
All right. Well, that was pretty easy, wasn't it? Let's do another one.
How many more examples?
This, we'll do 1 or 2 more. So, I gave you the short side. That was easy. I gave you the hypotenuse. That was pretty easy. We just found the short side first, and then we found the long side. This one's the one that's a little bit more tricky. Let's say that's 17. What if they give you the long side? That's
You
30.
divide.
That's right. What are we finding, though? Are we finding the hypotenuse?
No, the short side.
Finding the short side. Remember, the long side is equal to, let's get rid of that,
Square root of 3.
the square root of 3 times the short side, right? So if I knew this, I would multiply by the square root of 3 to get this. But if I'm going the other way, what do? I divide by the square root of 3. If you're not sure about that, use your little formula and stick the numbers in. What do I know on this formula? I know the long side, so put in 17 equals the square root of 3 times the short side. We'll call the short side x. So what is it? Times x. How do I get x by itself? Divide by the square root of 3. Do you see that? That's why we divide by the square root of 3. So I'm letting you leave it like that, okay? And you can leave it just like that. I'll tell you what, just for fun, let's do this.
I'm sick of this just
No, it is fun. We're having a ton of fun. It's all about fun for me. I'm asking you, watch. Well, what do you do to this? If I know the short side, how do you find the hypotenuse? You do what to it? Times 2. Right. So watch. 17 over the square root of 3 times what? Times 2. 2 over 1. How do you multiply fractions?
cross multiply.
Girls, I sure hope you're paying attention. So what is it? 17 times 2 is 34 over what? Square root of 3. So you could leave your answer like that. You could. I'm allowing you to leave your answer like this. As much as it pains me, because I teach all the time about simplifying this. And again, this is for fun. Let's just just so you remember. How can you get rid of that square root of 3 on the bottom? Times it by the square root of 3 here and the square root of 3 here. What allows me to do that? What's the square root of 3 over square root of 3? It's a 1. I'm allowed to multiply anything by 1, right? And it doesn't change the value of it. So what's this going to be? It's going to be 17, what? Square root of 3 over what? No. Square root of 3 times square root of 3 is 3. That would be the simplified version. Even though it looks more complicated than this is actually the simplified version of this. Why is it simplified? Because, right, your denominator's got a whole number and it doesn't have a radical. It doesn't have a square root. Okay? Make sense? But, look, I'll let you keep it like this. I'll let you keep it like this. Let's do one more. Let's do one more. And I'm going to give you the long side again, but I'm going to make the long side look maybe a little bit more complicated. Make it a square root, okay? So let's make it the square root of, I don't know, what haven't we used yet?
8.
Let's use 6. Okay? Now watch, that's right. This is 30. This is 60. I think we've covered almost every single scenario that you're going to see, all right? Except for this one, okay? So you know this. What's the first? Are we going to go directly to find the hypotenuse? No, short side. Look, we'll call this x, we'll call this h. Is that all right?
Yeah.
So how do you find the short side? Divide it by
the square root of 3.
That's right, okay? Divided by the square root of 3. So let's do that. Square root of 6.
Divided by the square root of 3, but you can't
What's
do
the
that.
rule? You put one big square root and you do what inside of there?
Divide.
6 divided by 3, which is not just a 2, square root of 2. So x equals the square root of 2.
And that equals
All right.
2 times the square root of 2.
That's right. And then the hypotenuse is just double this,
So
and
that
it's
would be
just 2. No, it's 2 square root of 2. It's 2 times the square root of 2 because it's doubling the square root of 2. You're not doubling 1, are you?
No.
You're doubling the square root of 2, so it's 2 square root of 2. So that's the hypotenuse, and that's the short side.
Not very hard.
It really isn't, but you just got to keep things straight, though, don't you? You got to keep things straight. You got to know 30, 60, 90. The long side is the square root of 3 times the short side. The hypotenuse is what?
Square root.
No.
No, 2 times.
2 times the short side, okay? And then on 45, 45s, way back here,
Square root of 2.
it's, oops, that's not us. Right. Both of these sides are the same, right? And this is the square root of 2 times one of these sides. You got it? So you got to remember those. You got to memorize them. Write a little list. See how that's in a box? Put that. Make a little list of 3 things. And then these 2 are in boxes. Make a list of those. All right, so you know what's going on. All right, I'll give you the worksheet, and then you can do that. Yeah, you can work together as long as you're working and you're not playing around. Okay.